cover-ups, lies, and in between, conspiracies, and those who dare to speak the truth. Get ready for a walk on the wild side. Welcome to Parlay with your host, Michael Gray.
Hi all, welcome to Parley. My name is Mike Gray, and we have a really good guest with us tonight, or today, depending on when you're listening. His name is Wolfgang Halbig, and he is an investigator on the Sandy Hook, the Newtown Sandy Hook debacle, or the Sandy Hook event. And I hate saying Wolfgang, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, first of all, thanks, Mike, for inviting me on your show. Basically, I'm just a 60-year-old retired person who worked in public service for 36 years. Came to this country at age 12, couldn't speak a word of English, and as you'll see today, you'll have a hard time shutting me up. I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen. I earned a privilege. One of the things that I've learned with that privilege is that I have a right to ask questions now, where before I could never do that. So America is the greatest country that you can live in. It allows you to ask questions, and it allows you to hold people accountable. I became a Florida state trooper, customs agent. You can only put so many people in jail, so I turned towards education, became a teacher, teaching American government, American history, became a head football, head baseball coach, eventually became an assistant principal, then a principal, and wound up as a director of school safety of a school district of 65,000 students. And also I worked as a director of risk management. So I feel like law enforcement, education, I never thought both of these would really have a tremendous impact on what I do today as a national school safety consultant.
Right. Fantastic. I'm looking at your website now, and on the very front page, it says Sandy Hook Justice, and the truth is just ahead, and I love it. What's the name of your website?
It's www.sandyhookjustice.com.
Great. Fantastic. And let's get into the meat. First of all, you're talking to an audience that is in the know, okay? Let's get to the meat of this. What do you think happened December 14, 2012?
Well, I think based on everything that I've learned, based on 18 months of submitting Connecticut FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests, and with them not responding, not returning phone calls, I believe this is just one of the biggest Homeland Security and FEMA capstone exercises. I think this is the biggest illusion that they've ever pulled on the American public. And they ought to be ashamed of themselves, because what they have done at Sandy Hook on December 14, 2012, Michael, they created panic and fear across the United States. They've inflicted emotional distress upon millions and millions of innocent people. And for what? And for what's the question?
Yeah. I mean, I could think of gun control and gun registration for one. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that's the way it was sold. I think if you noticed, as soon as Sandy Hook unfolded on the national news media, that's exactly what everybody, boy, did they get on that Second Amendment, gun control. But now we're finding out, if you really look at what their purpose was, it's all about mental health. If Congress doesn't change the law on guns, owners, constitutional rights, so what the government is doing, they found the back door. What they're going to do is use mental health to take the guns away. I'll give you an example. It's starting in Connecticut. Think about this one. Anyone listening, you want to homeschool your child because you don't trust the public schools. You think you can do a better job as a parent. Connecticut now has passed a law that if you want to homeschool your child because of Sandy Hook, your child has to have a complete mental health examination. And if you don't do that, you cannot homeschool your child. Now, is that the America that you and I know?
No, it's insane. It really is. It's just they're passing more and more of these draconian laws, and they're wondering why people are flipping out and, just not going along with this, because it's insane.
Yeah, but Michael, think about the long-term effect of what we're talking about right here. What's going to happen, they're going to send these kids to psychiatrists, and most likely 95% of those psychiatrists are going to put them on some kind of medication. I don't know. They now control the child. Pharmaceutical companies going to make a fortune. But what they have just done is started a record on a child, whether it's a girl or a boy, that one day if they ever want to buy a gun, they now have a mental health records. And guess what? If you've got mental health issues, guess what you cannot buy?
A firearm, correct.
That's how they're doing it. They're coming in the back door and nobody sees it coming.
What was the eye opener for you on Sandy Hook? For me, it was Robbie Parker.
For me as a national school safety consultant, being a trainer across the country, I teach school superintendents, school board members, and school administrators, teachers on what to expect if there's ever shots fired at a school or there's a gun inside. I train people what to expect. And the one thing that really caught my eye, when you have elementary school children, first graders, 6, 7 years old, and supposedly they've been shot, and you don't bother to put the trauma helicopters up into the air to bring the quickest and best medical services to them, that was my red flag. And then the next one I learned is that they refused to allow the paramedics and EMTs inside the Sandy Hook school all day long. Now, why would you do that?
That's a good question. Yeah.
I want to know who made that decision. Who's the incident commander who refused to pick up the phone and ordered the trauma helicopters to come in? Michael, you can almost wave them off, okay? But at least get them in the air. And the next thing is, once the school is safe, which is deemed safe 30 minutes into the event, why would you not let the paramedics and the EMTs in there who've been trained? They're ready to go, and they were refused access to the school all day long. People ought to be angry about that.
When you go up to Connecticut, and when those your fellow state troopers, mind you, confronted you and barred you from going, you want to tell that story? It's on YouTube.
Well, a lot of things happened to me up there. I mean, I went up to Connecticut not to create a problem or disturbance. I just wanted to see for myself the layout of the school, the Sandy Hook Volunteer Fire Department. I wanted to visit United Way Western Connecticut, who took in $29 million of donations from people from all across America. I just want to go look at their records, because anyone has the right to inspect the records of a nonprofit organizations. When I showed up at Danbury, Connecticut on May the 6th, they had 10 Danbury police officers stopping me from going inside the United Way Western Connecticut to inspect their records. Think about that. Refusing me entry to look at the records.
It's outrageous, really.
I think it's criminal. Number one, I had my attorney with us. We actually showed him the IRS regulations, which clearly states at the very top, open for public inspections. Anyone can check it. It says it on every 990 form. And they told us that you're not going in there. And they actually trespassed me. If I didn't leave within 3 minutes, I was going to go to jail.
Why did 10 officers show up, though? I mean, who gave that order that there were to be 10?
It's like everything else. Nobody wants to talk.
Yeah.
But you know what? To have bicycle patrol, motorcycles, You had police vehicles all over the place. And then for them to say, if you're not out of here in 3 minutes, we're going to put you in jail. And here's what the really ironic part about this whole story is they don't want you inside because they feel unsafe. Well, if they felt unsafe, then you police officers come inside with me to protect them. I just want to look at the records. You see how it works the other way?
They wouldn't do that.
They're afraid of me. You got 10 policemen that could have come inside with us to protect y'all.
Well, I mean, this thing's been a cash cow for a lot of people, right?
Oh, that's a lot of money. $29 million, and they're still collecting today.
Right. And most of the parents have also created these charitable foundations.
Oh, yeah, every parent has a nonprofit organization.
Right, yeah. Okay, so what really gets to me is how now you have on your website, and it's pretty interesting. I was trying to look it up. Someone handed you a script. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, back in 2002, I was hired by the United States Department of Justice to train 3,500 school police officers who were assigned to work in public schools. And those two Connecticut State Troopers happened to have been in my class in 2002. And all of a sudden I got a call one night saying, hey, you need to come up to Hartford. We want to show you something. So I met with these two Connecticut State Troopers who are my friends because we got to spend 3.5 days together in California. And they said, let me just show you one thing and you'll figure it out. They actually showed me the script that the Newtown Police Department on December 14th, 2012 were directed to use. Now I want you to think about it. When you go to my website, read the script. Show it to your local police chief or your local sheriff and ask them to tell you whether this is how they would talk on their radio communication. It just doesn't happen. It was a scripted event.
Right, yeah. Well, how long do you think this was planned? I mean, because there are people that are saying this was planned like 5 or 6 years prior to 2012.
You have to look at the history of the school. You're looking at 2010, maybe somewhere 2010. It took about 2 years for them to figure this script out. I mean, you got to remember, you've got the Newtown Police, you got the Connecticut State Police, you got the local funeral directors, churches. I mean, this is a capstone exercise. And what that means, if you Google it, look up Capstone Exercise 2012, Homeland Security, FEMA. It requires that the entire community be involved. And guess what they do with that exercise? It has to be a classified exercise. You know what the word classified means? That you're never allowed to talk about it. And this didn't make sense to me until I called the FBI offices in New Haven to see if I can get a copy of their report, their preliminary report. The FBI agent told me that this report is classified. Now look at this. Classified, whole community event, and the FBI uses the same word, classified. It's a secret. Nobody's supposed to ever hear about it. Why would you do that to innocent people in this country, using children and teachers as props?
It's criminal.
It is criminal.
There's no other way. There's no other word.
I think it's domestic terrorism. They willfully, knowingly, and intentionally inflicted emotional distress all across this country and the world. It's not just the United States. They shocked the living heck out of people all across America.
Yeah. They sure did. Yeah. Well, okay, so where do we go from here? Now, something's happening in February, you said.
Well, I told you at the beginning, 18 months I've been trying to use the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act. I'm nobody. I'm a public servant. Nobody knows who I am, and I don't want them to know who I am. I actually don't even want to be involved in this thing, to tell you the truth. I got 3 beautiful granddaughters, and I didn't get involved till 2 homicide investigators from Lake County showed up on my front doorsteps. And it was about a week before Christmas, and I invited them in. And I'm telling you, I'll never forget that day. Those two homicide investigators, they threatened me that if I did not stop asking questions about Sandy Hook, the Connecticut State Police were going to file charges and have me arrested. Now, I want you to think about what that means. I'm a former Florida State Trooper. I'm a former federal agent. I'm a school principal. I followed the law. I'm respectful. And I've got police officers in my own home telling me that I need to stop asking questions or I'm going to go to jail. Come on. This is not the America that we know.
And you live in the state of Florida.
Absolutely. I was a state trooper in Miami, Florida.
Right, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. They felt threatened by you from you living in Florida, and they felt threatened by you in Connecticut.
Yeah, but are you ready? If anybody's listening out there, think about this. Since when does the Lake County Sheriff's Department become the messenger for another police agency out of state? We don't do that.
Well, what was their attitude towards it? Were they like into it? Did they like threatening you?
They were very disrespectful to me.
All right, yeah.
And these are the law enforcement officers who live in my community, who work in my community. I ran for county commissioner in Lake County. Everybody knows me. You know, I am very respectful of the law, and to be threatened, being a naturalized U.S. citizen and earning the privilege, they really got me upset. And that's why I'm so angry. And that's why I'm committed to finding the truth. And the truth is ahead. It's coming. And come February, we're going to travel up to Hartford, Connecticut. We're going to appear in front of the Connecticut Freedom of Information Commission. And all of those people for the last 18 months who've ignored me are going to have showed just cause as to why they're refusing to answer my simple questions.
Yeah. Any lead on where those children are or the victims?
I don't think they even existed.
Yeah.
It's misdirection. Again, you're chasing 20 children. And, you know, if you listen, there's an interview that the Chief Halstead, the fire chief of the Sandy Hook Volunteer Fire Department, gave at a national conference of fire chiefs. Do you know during the hour, he never talked about the two children that had to be transported to Danbury Hospital. Never once did he say we had two children who were seriously injured. We had to transport them to Danbury, you know, and they died he never even talked about them. I mean, you're the chief. You're the incident commander, medical incident commander, and you don't even know whether you had two children transported. Let me tell you, they're off script. They're forgetting what the script said.
Yeah.
This is a game changer. I want you to know that this is something that people need to wake up to. Don't listen to Wolfgang Halbig. My God, I'm nobody. Hey, I'm just a grandfather, but I tell you what, you better wake up. If this government can use children and teachers to scare the living heck out of us, we're in serious trouble. And they know that the national news media, all we do is turn on the news at night, we watch it, and we actually believe what they tell us. Don't you dare listen to the national news and do not believe what they tell you.
Right. Oh, I know, yeah. Hey, did you see, what is it, a week ago now, one of the victims of that Peshawar, Pakistan massacre was Noah Posner, the same picture.
Yeah, now you think about it. They've got the most tragic shooting. We wake up, we watch CNN, we watch the national news, and my God, what a horrific event. 143 children in Pakistan are slaughtered, killed to death. And then the next day we look at the wall with all the children pictures up there they posted. And whose picture shows up on that wall in Pakistan?
Noah
Posner, the child who died at Sandy Hook. How can he die in two different places? And he even had a different name.
Yeah, who did that? I mean, who made that? It's just.
That's why the listeners on your show, please ask questions. Call your congressman, call your senator. Demand a congressional investigation. And I can make you one point. I'm going to just show you one thing. Go to Sandy Hook and look at the shot out window. Supposedly they had a guy named Adam Lancer. He shot his way through this glass window. And there's a hole in the window. Now I want you to picture 16 highly trained Connecticut State Troopers climbing through that window to get inside the Sandy Hook school. I want you to picture that. Now this is what they wrote in their sworn police affidavits. And I can promise you this, being a former state trooper, even the Three Stooges are smarter than those 16, because the Three Stooges would have sent Curly in to open the door for the other two.
Right.
Now, when you lie under a sworn affidavit, those are felonies.
Well, nothing about Sandy Hook. That's a funny thing. They planned this. They had 2 years to plan this, and they did such a piss poor job of it. You know? They really did. And it's almost like, well, did they want to get caught?
Well, you know, the thing that their mistake, I believe, being an administrator in public education, they didn't understand how we in public schools function. They just picked the wrong building and the wrong educational institution. And let me tell you why. I've been a principal. I've been a director of risk management. I know this for certainty. 100%. I am so sure of this. There's not one elementary school female principal in this country today that would ever allow her school to look so filthy and so deplorable on December 14th, 2012. The pictures taken by the crime scene photographers actually verify how filthy and deplorable it is. There isn't a female school principal in the United States today that would ever allow her school to become a toxic waste dump, exposing every child and school staff member to lifelong serious health risks. That school was loaded with lead paint all over the place. It was full of asbestos, installation, ceiling tiles, floor tiles, masking tape on the carpet. It had more PCP in the drinking water, groundwater in that school than ever seen in any other school in Connecticut. And you mean to tell me parents are going to send their child to that school? Oh, come on. We know better.
That was when you went to the fire station. Who was it? The fire chief that was yelling and screaming his head off at you? Who was that?
No. What's really amazing, I have to compliment the people that showed up there. I didn't know any of the people, but I came up there. I brought my attorney up there. I brought Jim Fetzer with me, who's been looking at this for a long time. I mean, the only reason I got involved is because those two investigators came to my house. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't even be talking today. They got me angry. They got me fired up, and I'm a bulldog. You don't threaten me. I earned the privilege of citizenship, and dear God, don't threaten me. And I paid my dues as a law enforcement officer. I worked in days when we didn't have trauma helicopters. I worked in Miami in 73 to 76. There was no paramedic, no EMTs. There were no trauma centers in Miami, Florida. What we had is crowbars and hammers and chisels in the back of our trunks to get people out of the vehicles, or buses, or trains, 18-wheelers. I mean, people have no idea what we had to do in those days. So I feel comfortable in speaking about death and people and grief and what they do when they have to come identify the body of a loved one.
Let me ask you, we all know the story of Serpico, and how all the police in New York were corrupt and on the take. But when you were in law enforcement, what was the percentage of cops that were bad because there were good cops. My best friend's a cop in Hoboken, and I have family members who are police, and they're good people, My cousin Sal, he's going to be in law enforcement. So there are a lot of good police officers in law enforcement out there, but there's still a percent. What would you say is the percentage of bad apples in law enforcement?
I don't think I can ever put a percentage on it, but I know this, that everyone who goes through an academy and we get in it for the right reason. We get in it because we believe we can make a difference in people's lives. We get in it because we want to serve and protect. We actually believe in our mission. It's what happens is that after you've been on the road or in a district for so long, you see the court system keep turning them out. And these people just get in your face and, they'll tell you, I'll be out of jail before you get home tonight. It's a big cycle of frustration. Cops don't go in there to be bad cops. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. In Miami, I was there 3 years, and I can tell you this. I could not wait to get out because you got the Miami police, you got Metro, you got state police, city police. And back in the 73 to 76, we don't even talk to each other. It's like we're competing against each other. Who's going to have the biggest drug bust? I mean, the games we play against each other instead of with each other. I wanted to get out of Miami. I didn't like it. And I saw how corruption unfolds very easily and very quickly.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was J. Edgar Hoover, and he didn't even want the FBI to handle or do anything, have anything to do with drugs, enforcing drug laws because he saw how corrupt, that they could get on the take. You know what I mean?
Well, you have to work. Let me tell you something. 3 years in Miami is 3 years too long for me. I mean, to be honest with you, if you're a good cop and a smart cop, you know where the drug dealers are, where they live. You know the money they carry in their cars and their trunk. I mean, if you want to rip somebody off, all you got to do is stop them. You take their dope, you take their money. What are they going to do? They're going to go to the police and tell somebody?
Right.
No, it's the opportunity to go bad are there. The question is, as a police officer, who are you? Why did you take the job? Did you do it for the right reason? Just like Serpico. He got into it because of the right reason. And it's very easy to lose your way when you see $500,000 of cash in the trunk of a car. I just have to say it. It's easy to lose your way.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. You see especially now because video cameras have been so ubiquitous that just cops are being caught doing things left and right, and it's really wearing down the American, the people,
Well, let me tell you what you're going to find. You put these body cameras on cops, nobody's going to want to be a cop anymore. You've already got, GPSs in every police car. Now you're going to put body cameras on every police officer. I mean, they already know where you are, what you're doing at all times. Right. What cop wants to wear a body camera to prove that? See, already you've accused him for being a bad cop. And the only reason he can prove that he's a good cop is by watching his body camera.
I mean, do you think dash cams were a good idea initially or no?
No, I you know what? I don't believe in all that stuff. You know what? I got in a job. I want people to respect me for the uniform that I wore. Okay. And guess what? I'm going to give you all the respect that you deserve until you take that respect away from me. Then we have a different conversation. We don't go in here to hurt people. We don't go in here to shoot innocent people. I mean, we just don't do that. And as I said before, we get into business because we want to be a police officer. It's a great job. I cannot tell you. It is one of the nicest jobs you can have. I wish I could have stayed 20 years. But the politics, the corruption from the state attorney's office all the way down, playing stupid games. Certain people are treated differently. And I just don't like it. I actually believe justice should be for all. It should be equal, not who has the money. I mean, the guy who sleeps on the street bench ought to have the same rights as the guy who's a multi-billionaire. Jesus Christ, we are America. It's supposed to be justice for all.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So, let's get back to Sandy Hook. We've kind of, taken a turn here. I don't want to bust on cops. Ultimately, where does this end for you as far as once February hits and the lawsuit comes out? Are you just going to put an end it?
Well, for me,
I remember you saying your wife was, that the stress on your marriage, your wife was threatening to leave you. I don't know if you were joking about that, but.
Oh, please, let me tell you something. I had a nice company called Children's Safety Institute with some great business partners. We were about to help children with autism and Asperger's. I mean, we've invested a lot of time, money. We made videos. We developed products. We were going to take this business across the country to help parents and teachers with autism. And I've lost my business over this. I'm about to lose my wife because people are just being nasty and ugly. I mean, all you got to do is go on Facebook, go out there and look at the things people are saying about me. And they have yet to pick up the phone to call me.
Right. Yeah. Those are paid government trolls, I'll say this. When you were debating on Infowars, Keith Johnson, I believe his name was.
Yeah.
All he could do was personally attack you. He couldn't stick to the topic of Sandy Hook. And all he did was rant and rave like a lunatic. And I was a little bit, I like Rob Dew, but I was wondering why he wasn't calling that guy out, and saying, hey, stop.
Well, he's the one that talked Infowars and challenging me. I don't know how this Keith Johnson has that.
Yeah,
kind of
but I mean, it's like, God, he was challenging. All he was doing was yelling and screaming like a lunatic.
Yeah, and they let him do it.
Yeah, I mean, and I even emailed them, and I said, I was disappointed in that they didn't control that more, Not that he couldn't say what he wanted, but I mean, that's not the point of a debate, to just yell at you and scream at you like an idiot.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We appreciate you. I appreciate you, and I know that the listeners of CJ Mars appreciate you, and you're doing a good work here. You really are, and we need more people like you. That's for sure.
Well, the thing that I can say is, if you want the truth, just read it for yourself and you decide. I have no agenda whatsoever. Man, I just want to be retired, play with my grandkids, but I urge you, go to www.sandyhookjustice.com, read the scripts for yourself. You decide. If you're law enforcement out there, paramedics or EMTs, stop being silent, because I know you know better. This is not how we would respond if we had a shooting in our community, in our elementary school. This is not how we would do it. So
Right.
Why are we silent? Why are we allowing this thing to stand?
Have you? I know you've talked to Jim Fetzer, and I'm a big fan of Jim Fetzer. But what about Sophia Smallstrom?
Yeah, she's a great teacher. She actually taught me a lot through her videos. When I got involved, I just looked what was out there, and I started looking at Fetzer and Smallstorm. James Tracy. I have so much respect for James Tracy. I mean, they went after him. He's a college professor. And I mean, the national news media went after him, trying to get him fired in his job.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Anderson Cooper did a personal hit piece on him.
Oh, let me tell you, Anderson Cooper attacked him. And I'm telling you, I'm proud of James Tracy because he was on the mark. And the reason I say he was on the mark is what we're doing. We're questioning. All James Tracy wants is the truth. He's no different than you and I today. He just simply is asking for the truth, and they refuse to give it to him.
Right. Well, all I know is there's a lot of green screen in the Sandy Hook interviews. Then when they were supposedly outside, Anderson Cooper's nose disappears, and one of the, he turns his head and his nose disappears. Did you see that?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of other ones. You got CBS where they're interviewing Gene Rosen, and all of a sudden in the camera A, it's got Gene Rosen and 2 reporters. And then when the camera B hits the 2 reporters, there's a mailbox sitting right behind them.
Right. Yeah.
Then when you go back to Gene Rosen, the camera disappears with a camera A shot. Well, then they got another lady on, same thing. Where does the mailbox come? See, they are so, the news media is part of this conspiracy.
They're losing all their credibility. That's what I don't understand, is that they don't seem to care that they've lost all credibility, and they just don't care.
Well, you remember part of the capstone exercise is the national news media has to buy in, and it's a classified exercise. They have to do what their script tells them to do. The government pays them to say those things.
It's outrageous.
It is.
Well, what's funny is, did you hear Anderson Cooper was saying that, I guess a week into it or a few days, people were catching on that this was a hoax, and Gene Rosen was being called out. People were calling his house and I guess threatening him, emailing him and telling him he was a fraud, and he was freaked out. In an interview, one of the Soto sisters said that when she was in Dunkin' Donuts, people were telling her it's a lie and a hoax, and no one died. So people are, calling these people out. And I wouldn't want to be. Listen, I would not want to be Gene Rosen. I would not want to be any of these, the Parkers or the McDonald's.
Well, let me tell you, I pray to God all the time that I hope that I'm wrong. And I can promise you this, at the end of the day, if they can prove that I am wrong, I'm going to tell you this. I live in Sorrento, Florida. If they can prove me that I am wrong in what I'm saying to you and all your listeners today, I'm going to run as fast as I can to the nearest mental health facility, and I'm going to voluntarily admit myself. Because you know what? I can't go around accusing parents that they conspired. I just can't do that. So
yeah, that's not something I would do either. I would never confront any of these people. That's not my place.
Correct.
But what I can do is go on YouTube and get compilations of them smiling and laughing throughout the interviews within days of this happening, and just saying, yeah, we're going to move on, and they're smiling and laughing throughout the interviews, and show people, hey, what's going on here?
And I never saw that at Columbine. I never, ever saw that at Columbine.
No, Columbine, really, people did die. That was, so.
You didn't see parents in Columbine set up fundraiser pages that same day or the next day.
No, the only weird thing about Columbine is Miss Harris, I think, one of the I can't remember the boys. His mother, within days of it, was seen in a hairdressing shop, getting her hair done, saying, I can't believe that she didn't see this coming. And it's like, really? You're getting your hair done, and your kid murdered all these people. Why aren't you in hiding? I always thought that was odd.
That's the thing we do. We look at tragedy, we try to see the causes of it and how we can prevent it. So we're going to spin this thing forever, but my goal is to get them under deposition. I'm going to find the first person. I've hired a couple of attorneys, and in the next month or so, we're going to have somebody deposed. And
that's good. Who specifically? Who are you
going
to?
No, I can't. I don't want to say that now. So.
Okay.
But the only way every one of us out there in the YouTube world, whatever they're doing, we can only make so many videos, but somebody has got to hold them accountable, and somebody's got to get them to raise their right hand, and you've got to get them into a deposition. And guess what? Now you're controlling them. They are no longer controlling us. And now it's time for us to get the truth.
Unless the judge is in on it.
Not in the deposition.
Yeah, that's good. That's true. That's true. Well, I mean, this is. I'm definitely going to follow up on this and watch what you have to say. You know, so keep it coming. I hope you put it on your webpage there.
Well, you saw one parent try to shut down my fundraising PayPal here in Florida.
Which one was that?
Yeah.
Which one was that?
Yeah, they wrote a letter to Pam Bondi, the Florida Attorney General, calling me a fraud.
Who did that?
Lenny Posner, the father of
the one whose kid is in Pakistan
wall.
Yeah.
Isn't that strange? The person whose child who died at Sandy Hook has his picture on the wall in Pakistan,
right, raising
a different name,
right.
And he's calling me a fraud. Now there's some irony.
Well, I really wonder if they're all like CIA.
You know, I don't even worry about that. What I got to do is just find out. I just got to get him into depth. I know where I want to go being a football coach. You got to have a game plan and you follow it. And I've got a plan. I just can't wait to get there in February.
Let me ask you this. I mean, do you see any hints of a negative religious, like black magic aspect?
No, I don't even focus on that.
You don't want to go there.
I only look at Sandy Hook from my experience as a principal.
Okay.
I just know this. I know how we run schools, elementary, middle, and high schools. I know how we function. I know what we have to show the reporters, you know, when they're asked for FOIA requests. I know what's public record, what isn't. So I'm using my experience in trying to find the truth at Sandy Hook. The truth actually lies within the school. And that's where I'm going to stay focused at. I'm going to prove that Sandy Hook was not a working school. So if I can prove it was not a working school with 600 kids in it, then there could not have been a shooting. True?
Correct.
That is my mission.
And where are the 600 kids on the day that it happened? There were not 600 kids outside of that school.
No, the national news media and the helicopters would have caught that because
Correct.
They catch it at every other. I mean, look at Lake Mary High School. You know, when they heard supposedly shots in the school, they had helicopters watching those kids run out the doors, every door with their hands above their heads. You look at every school shooting, the helicopters are there watching kids evacuate and run for their lives. Sandy Hook, we don't see anybody. Their answer is they had a tunnel. You know, there was a tunnel in the school, and that's how they got all the kids out through the tunnel.
Really? I didn't hear
that. Well, that's what some of the reporter comments out of Connecticut said. There was an underground tunnel, and that's how they got all the kids out.
Well, you know, they even showed a picture of the parking lot when no cars were on the parking lot, and there's not an oil stain on the parking lot. None. You know?
The answer of Sandy Hook, whether it happened or not, lies within the boundaries of inside that school. It's filthy. It's deplorable. And I can promise you, you and Cindy, you'd have never sent your children to that school. Have you ever looked at the crime scene photographs of the hallway? There are lines 8 inches off the ground, off the floor, on both sides of the wall. There's a straight line on each side of the hallway. You know what that tells you? The school was flooded.
Oh.
Those are mold. That's not filthy. It's a mold. The school was flooded, and that's your water line, 6 to 8 inches from off the floor. It goes all the way down the hallway on both sides. You can see it everywhere.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up.
And what you're looking at is mold, mildew.
There's a lot more to the story, and I'm just glad that you're exposing this stuff, you know.
Well, I'm doing it for my grandkids, and think about it. I've got
and also, you have the gravitas. It's not like you're some nut off the street. I mean,
I've earned the privilege of having a conversation with you. I've seen things, and I live with them for the rest of my life, and I'm trying to use my experience, and I'm only using it because they threaten me. Otherwise, I'd be silent as a mouse. I'd be like everybody else, sitting here just seeing if somebody could expose it. But when you threaten me, then I know that I'm on the right track. You know that when they come after you, somehow you touch the nerve.
Are you going to write a book about your experiences with all this? 'Cause I'm sure
wish
it
there
would
was
be
a
a
writer
best.
that could help me. I need a ghostwriter. I'm not good. I've got everything in my head. I just don't know how to write. So I'm not a writer. I need somebody.
Well, I would imagine half the book could be the script that they gave you right there.
Well, if you read, all you have to do is look at Newtown police script, and you look at the Connecticut State police script. They don't even match. I mean, think about it. You got police agencies responding, and they don't even talk to each other, or they don't even match.
Now, is it true that the FBI put murders in Newtown at 0?
Yeah, absolutely. FBI is the keeper of the national database system. One of their highest priorities is to keep accurate records of murders, manslaughter, burglaries, rapes. I mean, they are the keeper of the data.
I told my friend this, and I showed it to him, and then he goes, "Oh, look, I think Snoop's," because he goes on Snoop's, okay? And basically, oh, well, Snoop said that's because it's considered a terrorist act and not
That's
a murder.
No. Are you ready? How can Sandy Hook be considered a terrorist act?
I know.
It's a child with autism, supposedly, Asperger. He's not a terrorist. And here's the thing. The reason the FBI data is so important, every state, every year when they apply for federal grant money, for violent crimes in their states, they have to use the FBI database to justify as to why they should be getting funding. As their murder rate's too high, their burglaries are too high, robberies are up, violent crimes are up. So this is how they get their federal money. So when you look at the FBI database and they show no murders in Newtown in 2012, something is not right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what did they say about that then?
Well, the FBI, when you contact them, I mean, I do my homework. I do my due diligence. The FBI basically says, well, they didn't post it on the request of the Connecticut State Police. They didn't want to hurt the parents' feelings.
Aw. You know the saying, it doesn't hold water?
Yep. You and I know it. Now we need to get your listeners to see it. You have the magic. Ask them just to look at it, open their eyes, open their heart, and don't listen to anybody else. Don't listen to me or anybody else. Let them make their own decisions.
You know what's funny is we've been conditioned since we were little to believe what's on the news, And so because Peter Jennings, well, he's not with us anymore, but, because Dan Rather said it or the talking head said it, it must be true.
Yeah.
And it's so not,
Well, let me leave you with this. Are you ready? Pretend that your father or your listeners have a first grader, whether girl or boy. And dear God, I hope it never happens, but you hear that your little girl was shot and killed at their elementary school, okay? And they're asking you to go down to the medical examiner's office. But when you get down there, the medical examiner tells you that you're never going to see your child or touch her while she's at the medical examiner's office. What we're going to do is show you a picture of her or him, and you identify your child based on the picture. But you cannot see them. You cannot touch them. You got to be kidding me. You know what it would take for them to hold me back?
I don't think any of the parents said that they saw their child.
No,
right?
None
of them, right?
The examiner in his national news conference clearly said, we did not allow those parents and loved ones to come in contact with their children or loved ones. They did not let them touch them. They did not let them hug them. They did not let them comfort them and be with them at the last I just can't imagine.
Now, wait. That's Wayne H. Carver, correct?
Yep.
Dr. Strange?
Yep.
Right. The one who was laughing and giggling throughout the press conference?
Yeah. Well, he said it. He says I got great photographers. We took great pictures. And you're going to tell me you're a parent standing down there and they're going to show you a picture of your little child, and that's all you're going to see?
And he also said, I just hope this doesn't come crashing down on the people of Newtown. Remember that?
Correct. Which is so out of context.
Right, yeah. And how did, let me ask you this, how did that tent or whatever that from the Army, how did it get there so quick? Why was the DEA and the FBI there so quick?
Those are answers I don't even look at. Remember, where am I focused? Sandy Hook School.
You're right. I'm sorry.
No. I think those are good. No. Are you ready? Those are good questions for so many others to be asking. Me, I can tell you exactly how to trace the footsteps of police officers who respond to a school shooting. I know how we're supposed to show everywhere we go, how we go, where we go. We have timelines. I just don't see that in any sworn affidavits at Sandy Hook.
Well, Wolfgang, let's wrap this up. You know, you've been a great guest, and I don't care what anyone else says. I think you're the real deal. Because I watch, you know, I don't see any red flags with you. I don't think you're COINTELPRO. I think COINTELPRO's going after you. And
I don't even know what that means.
Well, okay. Well, the government paid trolls who are hired to do hit pieces, you know, they're going after you, okay?
Sure.
So you're trying to expose the truth and get at the truth, and that's why you're being attacked.
Yeah. Well, I've been called a Mossad agent. Just ignore it. Mossad agent. I don't know all these other terms.
And you work for the Saudis, okay?
Yeah.
No, I don't think, I haven't seen that you've done anything hinky, you know what I mean? So I like you. You're okay in my book as far as I'm concerned. So let's wrap this up, and you want to give your website again?
Please. I've got attorneys that we're having to pay legal bills. If you'd like to donate $0.25, $1, whatever.
Oh, yeah. You got to pay
if you'd like to help us with our legal funds, please don't hesitate. And just go to www.sandyhookjustice.com. There's a PayPal button at the bottom. I used to have a GoFundMe where you could donate there, but they've taken that down because I was called a fraud. So that was taken away from me. So it's just a battle. I just hope that you guys can see past all of that and just help in any way you can.
Sure. You're in our prayers.
I really, really appreciate that.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before, we wrap this up and go?
No, just keep up with us and go to our website and just read the information for yourself.
Okay. I would love it if you'd come back and do a follow-up show after February.
Anytime.
Wolfgang, that's fantastic. Mr. Halbig. Mr. Halbig.
No, Wolfgang's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And this was our first show. Well, that was our great guest, Wolfgang Halbig. Stay tuned. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Professor James Tracy on CJ Mars Radio. This is Parley. I'm your host, Mike Gray.
You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York.
Paranormal King Radio Network has the best hosts and guests the paranormal has to offer. Every weekday, Mondays, 8 Eastern, Delaware Paranormal Princess Radio with Melissa Overton from the Paranormal Investigators of Delaware. Tuesday, 9 Eastern, Paranormal Teas and Ponderings with the teacher Frank Lee from Central Alabama Society for Paranormal Investigations and Research. Wednesdays, 8 Eastern, Paranormal Experience with Catherine Hobson of Spirit Communications and Research, Alabama. Thursday, 8 Eastern, Paranormal King Radio with the Paranormal King himself, Ross Rapasso. Fridays, 8 p.m., Paraversal Universe with Kevin Malik and Jennifer Sclessi from the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society. Fridays, 11 Eastern, Dead Creek Radio, live with myself, Will Pritchard, from Dead Creek Paranormal. We strive to bring you the best paranormal stories in an educational, informative, and entertaining manner, only on Paranormal King Radio Network, where the paranormal will never be the same again.
Hi, and welcome back to Parlay. And we have another great guest, Professor James Tracy. James, you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, Michael.
Oh, hi, James. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
We're obviously, we're doing this show about Sandy Hook, and we just had Wolfgang Halbig on the air, and he gave us an interview, a really good interview. And let's get into the Sandy Hook thing and where you come into this whole thing. Specifically, Anderson Cooper trashing you.
Yeah, that took place on a Friday, and a Friday in a week from hell. I mean, it was really very much high pressure. It began with an article that appeared in the Sun Sentinel newspaper down here, the Fort Lauderdale or South Florida Sun Sentinel, that focused specifically on me and my allegedly crazy conspiracy theories that included Sandy Hook. So there was an attempt to set a profile of me. It was, I thought, defamatory in certain ways, and the newspaper was, I think, aware of the nature of the article that they were putting out there, because when they did put it up online after interviewing me for a couple of hours on the telephone, I had the notion that, first of all, it wasn't going to be that negative of a take, and it actually turned out to be exactly that. And they were contacting me and asking, is there anything you object to? Is there anything in there that I said, no, that's fine. And I thought it would more or less blow over. I didn't realize it was going to become a national story. And I guess that I really did not look at it with a critical eye to the extent that I should have, and realize that I was being placed in a very negative light, in particular, given the context of that period. That point in time was just about 3 weeks or so after this event took place, that was, had tremendously tragic dimensions. And here I was coming along and saying, well, wait a minute, how do we really know whether or not this took place in the way in which the media have reported it? That's generally the gist of it. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. What led you to think that? Was it people were putting on YouTube within, I think, a week after it happening, like Robbie Parker laughing during his first interview, and people were just putting these compilation videos of all the parents' interviews. Mm-hmm. Did you see that on YouTube at all, or was that the origin
I'm sure that I saw some of those. There were a lot of people doing very interesting and thoughtful work in terms of digging and research and putting it on YouTube or posting on it otherwise. A lot of the material did appear on YouTube, and it came to my attention several days after the event. When the event took place, I really didn't stand up and take notice. I usually don't do that with things in the news. It takes me a while to get around to them, to the point where I can actually sit down and concentrate on, okay, what took place here, And I heard about it, this event and what have you. But it took, I think I posted the first article about 6 days after the event, I think on December 20th. And there were other individuals in alternative media that were discussing it, that were talking about it. And I was stating that at the time I thought perhaps there was more than one shooter, given the aerial footage from the helicopter, and look at the context of the American history and the deep events we've had since the early 1960s. Perhaps this is another one. I was not certain, but I was speculating to a certain degree, and that's generally what I did with the subsequent articles. That, again, it's very interesting to see because I'm a professor of media studies, and so I study news media and journalism all the time. It was very interesting to be, I guess, on the receiving end of a process like this where an individual can be framed in such a derogatory way because the news media took certain snippets, as you probably saw, out of my articles and then ran with it and created, this sort of profile of me. There are various sites from the left to the right that were partaking in this, and yet what's also kind of depressing is that no one actually, well, I shouldn't say no one, but far fewer people actually went to Global Research, where some of the work appeared, or to my site and actually read the material. Now, there were some. There was a percentage, I would say maybe 5 or 10%, if that, versus out of all of those that actually did hear about the story about the crazy conspiracy theory professor in South Florida. And, that's something that... Yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, let me just ask you real quick, because the impetus to all this was, would you say the Anderson Cooper trashing of you on CNN?
Oh, he jumped on board several days after the Sun Sentinel article came out and several days after the story became a national, if not an international story. There were some UK papers that had also picked it up, such as the Daily Mail. And so he came a little bit late to the party, but nevertheless, I think that his commentary, which in hindsight, a number of people contacted me and said, wow, he's really worked up. I've hardly ever seen him like this. And the fact that he presented himself in such a fashion, going after you to such a degree, prompted me to actually look closer at what you were saying, and I think that might have been the reaction with quite a few individuals, so that I may have never heard from. And so I think that it did backfire to a certain degree because it was so vehement on his behalf and on the behalf.
I thought it was libelous, to be honest with you.
Well, it's something that potentially could have endangered my family. That's one thing that I was very frightened about. Myself, I don't care quite as much about, but the fact that they went and filmed in front of my home, as if I was someone who was just released from prison and was a dangerous criminal or something along those lines. Yeah. What's really also interesting about that is that I declined from going on because my family, my wife in particular, by that time was really pretty upset and disturbed about the coverage and the whole thing. And we both work at the same university as well. And she works over in the library. So, she was, for a number of reasons, not only the domestic sphere, but also the workplace. She's fairly cool-headed, but she just, enough. I don't go on to CNN. If it were left up to me, I would have gladly gone on and tangled with Anderson Cooper, despite the pressure and so forth that I felt. But they sent a reporter out here who spoke to my chair, who spoke to the deans of the college, who went to the president of the university. This was an attempt to
be fired.
Yes, exactly.
Silence you, yeah.
And I was not, rather CNN was not the only source of this, but they were really trying very hard. And then they wanted to get an on-camera interview with me, which I was very wary of. And again, I spoke with the reporter, John Zarella, a number of times, who was very insistent. And I said, look, I made an agreement with, the person I love, the person I live with. I don't have to live with you, and I don't care to go on. And he contacted, was, again, very persistent. He called and said, I'm just a few blocks away from your residence. Do you mind coming out and just speaking with me for a few minutes? And I said, I'm not going to do that. And so that is when they proceeded to film out in front of my house. I was there, but I was not aware that they were actually doing that. I didn't realize that they had done that until I saw it broadcast on CNN, actually broadcast on their website. I didn't see it live.
Wow.
And
that's got to be a weird thing. Here you are, you're not in the media,
Yeah.
You're not an actor or anyone famous, and now all of a sudden your good name is being trashed on CNN. And,
right.
That clip is on YouTube. It's a good 10 minutes of them just, Anderson Cooper just doing a hatchet job on you.
Well, and they wanted to bust me down or rather, they wanted to escort me, to send transportation for me to go to a local studio and put me under the lights. And then so I'm, of course, actually out of my element, whereas they interviewed Jonathan Kay and then the Salon journalist, the young man, Alan Seitz Vald. They interviewed both of those guys on Skype, but they wanted me in the studio. After they covered it for about 3 days, I talked to some colleagues, and I finally said, okay, I'll go on. And I want to go on live, and I'll go down to a studio if you want me to. And that was, I think, the following Wednesday. So it was 5 days after the first time that they had covered this. And they contacted me. Cooper's producer contacted me that morning. A couple of hours later, I call back and say, I'll go on. I'm there. And I didn't hear anything back. So I don't know if by that time it was a game of chicken or, they may very just well have gone on to the next thing they were reporting on and figured that story was dead. So who knows? Wow.
So where are we now as far as, are you still being bothered or?
No, not at all. It was, there was a very interesting dynamic that played out between myself and my employer, because this is something that was really looming in the background for me. Was I going to perhaps lose my job because there was pressure brought to bear on my employer, obviously. Now, this itself is very disconcerting because a university, a place of higher learning, I made some comments that were controversial. I am a professor of media. I thought the coverage was bizarre, involving
how they kept making so many mistakes, right?
Yeah, all of these things. It was just an amalgam of things, just a panoply of things. Now, one could pass up saying, okay, Robbie Parker was laughing and okay, fine. I've been to wakes and where people close to me have passed, and you do get together, and it's kind of a de facto family reunion. You haven't seen people for years, and you're really you have a mixture of moods. Okay, that's fine in and of itself.
Well, can I just say something right there?
There's so many other, there are just so many other things that were just so bizarre about the reportage. And
can I just say something about that real quick about different, when people die. You're right. At my grandmother's funeral, I can remember, and people's funeral, we were laughing. But we're talking about an older person passing, not a child or children being murdered.
I know.
Out of the blue.
Yes. And
that's what I try to tell people who, like I know a nurse. I have a nurse friend who would say to me, oh, I've known people who were dying of cancer and blah, blah, blah. And, after a year of dealing with it, the parents or the family members were relieved. And I'm like, no, this is not the same thing.
Yeah.
This is a violent death. This is a violent murder.
Oh, 26 violent murders.
28, right? Because they don't count Adam Lanza. Notice that too.
Sure. Yeah. And that's another thing as well. There's if something happens like that, anyone that has lost a person close to them in a violent type of way realizes how traumatic that is. And I have. None of that trauma is registered on the faces of the individuals who were interviewed. And on the contrary, and not just Parker, but just about everyone else there, including the coroner. Yeah. So it seemed to me that there was just this element of it that I thought was very suspicious. And in all of my articles as well, I was careful to say, what if perhaps this is the case? And I never came out and affirmatively said that this, in fact, was the case. And I think that they took the most declarative statements of mine and highlighted those completely out of context. So I think that I was previously, a moment ago, I was talking about the media again and Cooper and the pressure that was brought to bear on my employer. And again, a university is supposed to be there, at least in theory, in the best of all possible worlds, to actually lead thought, discussion, deliberation, and not be a follower. But here you had the media pressuring a university into reprimanding, disciplining one of its faculty for speaking out on a controversial issue of public concern. So it's like the tail wagging the dog here. And that's one of the things that was very upsetting. In addition to, this backdrop of me potentially losing my employment, because for a while I wasn't sure whether or not I might. And fortunately, we have a fairly strong faculty union here. I did not have to resort to, going to court or anything of the like. So it was resolved in that fashion, but not before there were various disciplinary measures. I felt as if there were also mobbing techniques that were done on me by the administration here.
Retribution, yeah, sure.
Yes, yeah. And that those things were coordinated. Now I'm fairly certain of that because I have some of the emails. I've done public records requests. I've gotten emails between administrators and faculty, and I'm fairly certain that that was something that did take place, that did transpire. There's no way that they could actually terminate me. I have tenure, and therefore I am entitled to due process, but they were attempting to make life very difficult for me in the way of rescheduling my classes, canceling my classes. At one time, after I remarked on the Boston Marathon bombing in mid-April, professors sent a letter to the local newspapers here stating that I should resign. And at the same time, they have not come to me and said, well, I'd like to debate you on this. I have facts that counter what you're stating, which is what an honest individual, in particular an honest scholar, would actually say. Wait a minute, what you're saying is wrong. So, and I'm going to prove it. Now, that will be the appropriate thing to say if they want for me to resign. But it was just a matter of mudslinging, which was unfortunate and also kind of disappointing for people that I am on the same campus with.
It almost seems like we're going into an era of what it was like to live in the Soviet Union when Stalin was running the show,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was there was a teacher at a school in upstate New York that was forced to go under psychiatric evaluation back in 2013 because of an intercepted IM message. Now, apparently, we don't know exactly how the authorities got a hold of this, but he was forced by law enforcement to undergo psychiatric evaluation because of his uncertainties about the Sandy Hook event, because he questioned things like geoengineering, weather modification, which this is something that's on the books.
Chemtrails. Yeah, the chemtrails in the sky. Right.
We know that these are programs that are underway by various, government or non-government or quasi-government actors. So anyway, it's not even a matter of controversy. I suppose it is if you're an avid reader of the New York Times and you don't really read anything else outside of that kind of bubble. But we know that these things take place, and yet this person had to undergo extensive, like for 10 or 12 days, psychiatric evaluation because of what he was saying in a personal message to someone else. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly what would take place in the Soviet Union, and it's not a matter of straying from Marxian orthodoxy. It's something else. It's, I think, in part a matter of kind of straying from this ideology of American exceptionalism that has been with us for some time, and I think is part of what clouds our vision in terms of actually being able to look concretely and honestly at some very disturbing events in our history.
And this will be the new way to take away everyone's rights, basically calling us all mentally ill.
Well, that's part of the agenda of Sandy Hook, as you know. It's not just Sandy Hook. I mean, there are other pretty prominent shootings such as Tucson and Aurora and some others that have really gotten less coverage. There's, of course, the FSU shooting, which I've done quite a bit of work on recently. And in all of these instances, there is this frame of mental illness when really, if you look more closely, there are a lot more complex set of events, circumstances with all of these events, including, of course, Sandy Hook. And now out of Sandy Hook, there's a whole there's a whole program of mental health protocols that are being proposed and that actually are getting now federal funding.
Right. I know this may sound crazy, but I think the list of all things being staged, Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, I think the Eric Garner thing was staged. I think the Mike Brown thing was staged. The Miriam, what was that black lady's name? Miriam Carey, who supposedly got killed in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
I think that was staged.
I can't say because I haven't looked closely at all of these events, but so I'm not able to really draw that conclusion, but there is a possibility. And now, the floodgates are open legislatively in terms of the law, in terms of propagating the American public. And we have a government that for 50 years now, we know that they have partaken in things like COINTELPRO. They have been involved in things like the assassination of very well-known and beloved political leaders, not only in the United States, but overseas, and a host of other crimes. Certainly not the government as a monolithic sort of thing, but very,
criminal rogue elements within the government. Yeah.
Elements within the government, right. And so why should we put it past them if they have the capability to be able to pull off these things in 2012, 2013, 2014? And that's also related to another thing that involves the conglomeration and the concentration of the media. It's in so few hands now that it's not really the kind of watchdog that it was, not to romanticize the past and say it did a super job in the past, because it's always had its problems. But when you did have more owners, granted, they're wealthy families, but there were more owners, and now it's just like about 4 or 5 major corporate owners, transnational companies that own most of the media, and so they're the ones that, in many ways, call the shots and tell their editorial staff to look here, not there. And when you have far fewer entities involved in doing that, that's a recipe for disaster, especially if you have what we have here, which at least in theory is a democratic republic. And that democratic republic is only good in terms of it's only as good as the information that its citizenry has and cares to have and cares to act on.
Right. Has any of the family members contacted you from Sandy Hook, or have they tried to, especially really, like Lenny Posner?
There was, I was so besieged with emails in the first half of January of 2013 that most of them I've gotten through and read, but I mean, there were hundreds, and some of them went to spam or junk files, and there were a few calls that were really unusual that I got on voicemail. I mean, really kind of cryptic. In some cases, people not even saying anything, but just kind of breathing hard. In one instance, this woman contacted me very adamant, saying that she was from Newtown and that she cleaned the blood out of the shoes of the little children that were killed, and how dare you say that it didn't happen, and so on and so forth. Really disturbing stuff. Unfortunately, I did not make a copy of that. I'm sure it's probably somehow in the school's, answering service system. I wouldn't know how to ferret it out. There was an email that I got from a young lady who said that she was a student here at the university, and she was originally from Newtown, and that she was very disturbed by what I said. She was also interviewed by, I think, one of the Comcast television outlets up there in the Newtown, that particular area, after returning from the semester here, and then I've not been able to get in touch with her and trace her, and because she was making these assertions that she was, for example, there at the event, that she knew the Parkers and the like, things that now don't really add up unless she was somehow in on the construction of the event itself.
Right. Well, have you seen the list of all the money that went into Newtown after this event? I sent it to you. Anyone could go on YouTube and look up Sandy Hook, the money. Mm-hmm. And, really, there's a short list. Do you want to hear it?
Well, you're talking about, of course, there are a lot of well-meaning Americans that have...
No, I'm not talking about donations of Americans. I'm talking about the federal government. Okay, so you have state donation to Catherine Hubbard Foundation, $4,800,000. Musical benefit for Catherine Hubbard Foundation, $20,000. Fundraiser for the $50,000 for her foundation, $30,000 for a peace team for Catherine's peace team. Catherine's peace team, $100,000. 26 Ma for Candace Pravati, $13,666. The Chase Kowalski Fund, $75,421. Benjamin Wheeler's Lighthouse, $40,000. 25. This struck me. $25,500,000 to Sandy Hook victim families. So each family got about $1 million right off the bat.
And that funding was coming from whom?
It just says $25,500,000 to Sandy Hook victims' families. I think that was from the government. $50 million to demolish and rebuild Sandy Hook School. $50 million?
Love that, yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of money. There's
$15 million to the Newtown Lasting Changes Fund. To Newtown, okay, $1,300,000 to the Newtown Department of Education. $1,900,000 to the Newtown Department of Education. $7,100,000 to responders and victims' families from the DOJ, the Department of Justice. $7,100,000. And $4,300,000 to victims' families and witnesses, United Way. Which, by the way, that United Way thing was put up before December 14th.
Yeah, and I know that Wolfgang Helbig went there as well, and he was denied entry to go and actually look at their records. That's on. Yeah. I was unaware of the $25 or $26 million that was distributed to the families, but it makes sense, and I'm sure that there are some contractual obligations as well in terms of what they can and cannot say in public.
Did you find it odd that a state trooper, each family had a state trooper guarding them for like over a month? Remember that when they said that on the news?
Yes.
That each family had a state, and I said to myself, I was scratching my head going, well, why do they need a state trooper guarding them when the guy was killed? Adam Lanza was killed.
I didn't have one when Anderson Cooper attacked me on television.
Yeah. But, I found that very odd. Yeah. Like, well, why do they need a state trooper guarding them?
Well, they didn't want the media asking any questions of the families, obviously. I think that was the overt purpose was to keep any journalist away from asking any types of questions because the families were in mourning. That's, as I recall, that was the principal reason for having the police there as security.
Well, there's a cast of characters in this. I mean, Gene Rosen, you couldn't. I've watched all that guy's interviews, and his beard changes in the interview. Have you noticed that? If you watch all his interviews, his beard actually goes from kind of ruffled or, to then tanned. Like the whiteness in his beard it goes from gray or white to like someone put Grecian formula in or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Wayne H. Carver.
Yeah, well, there are a number of individuals, a number of characters, not just those people, but they've never reemerged. They've never been brought back on television. They're not on a speaking circuit or anything of the like. They just disappeared. Carver is a very good example. and so is Gene Rosen.
Yeah.
They're not out there talking about. Now, some of the families are, obviously. Several of the families are, they were in D.C. within a week or so on Capitol Hill lobbying for gun control, which is really amazing. I mean, they were there very quickly in D.C.
They didn't even let the bodies be buried first. It's like, okay, get to D.C. on Air Force One.
Right.
President.
Yeah, if there were, again, if all of those funeral arrangements and carrying them out actually transpired. But yeah, they were off there lobbying. So they've obviously been in the public eye, but other individuals are completely absent. I mean, strangely so. I think the Parkers, maybe once or twice, they've appeared in very, managed interviews. But anything outside of that, anything spontaneous, public speaking or what have you, they've just dropped out of the scene.
Well, and the one thing I'm really shocked is that no one's ever tracked down the father, Peter Lanza, or the brother, Ryan. They've never given interviews or...
Well, they supposedly did. There's this Andrew Solomon, as you know, who has very close ties to the pharmaceutical industry. He's kind of a public intellectual. He wrote a piece advocating for, universal mental health screenings just about a week after the Sandy Hook event. So he's on the bandwagon there. And again, there's a very big agenda there that I've done quite a bit of research on. So Andrew Solomon did interview Peter Lanza, but it was a very unusual interview. It appeared in the New Yorker, all right? So big, prestigious outlet, but really strange. I mean, if you happen to look at it, happen to read it, then he made the rounds. He was on NPR and interviewed elsewhere. And this Andrew
Solomon or the father?
Andrew Solomon was the journalist, the writer that interviewed Peter Lanza.
Right. But I was saying, why wasn't Peter Lanza? How come no one's, like TMZ, how come no one's tracked this guy down going into his house or, in his daily life? We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in 5 or 6 minutes.
You are listening to WCJV Digital Broadcasting, Youngstown, New York.
We're back with Professor James Tracy. Hey, James, you want to give your information, your website, and your, where you teach and your credentials a little bit? And
actually, that's an interesting point that you bring up because I have an agreement with my employer that I'm not supposed to actually call myself by the title that you just called me, and I'm not supposed to mention the name of where I work in the same breath as my blog. That's the legal agreement that I have because, and I haven't been told that what I said is wrong. I haven't been told what I've said is unethical, that it's factually wrong, that it's inflammatory. I've just been told that I'm not supposed to do that. So I guess I will wear the hat of the academic whose university shall go unnamed and who blogs. The blog is memoryholeblog.com.
You want to talk about living? Life has gotten so surreal in the last 20 years. Don't you think?
Yeah, it really has. And we were talking about the Soviet Union the first half of the show, and this that you experienced in the Soviet Union. I suppose I could, and perhaps I will at some point actually contest the idea that the fact that I have to do this and kind of live in the shadows to a certain degree. There are other professors in my college where I teach who might, for example, be involved in or be scholars in right-wing organizations that are, very supportive of the state of Israel, things like that, which one could certainly quite easily classify as being at least a semi-genocidal state that does really very terrible things to Palestinian inhabitants and what have you. But those things aren't controversial. But I assess the media coverage of Sandy Hook or Boston, and that is. It's kind of like, anymore the university, one thinks of it as being like the place where there's free thought and academic freedom, but I mean there are a lot of real constraints on those things. So I also have a program, a weekly program that is on Truth Frequency Radio called Real Politic, and that's on every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And you can also find out more about that on a website that I have set up for that show that's accessible via the memoryholeblog.com site.
Is that live? Do you do live shows and take calls?
Frequently, no. In most instances, the show was at a time, it was previously on a weekday night, and that was less opportune for me. Now it's on, a weekend night, it's on Sunday night. I might start doing that, but since it's only, 52 minutes on the air, I generally don't take calls. It's pre-recorded. I want to give as much time to the interviewee, to the guest that I have on as possible. Perhaps if or when the show expands to a couple of hours, that I might be able to take, calls. But it's a good deal of preparation, as you likely know.
Oh yeah, believe me.
Questions and it takes a few hours or more for every hour that you're on the air, at least. And I know other folks who do interview shows, and of course they've got understudies. They've got assistants who are able to help them out in terms of preparation. Well, you might not have that. I surely don't have that. And so I want to do as good of a job as I can with an hour show and not try to spread myself too thin.
Right. You want to get into a list of the characters that we, the parents, like, I was just listening to Scarlett Lewis, the mother of Jesse Lewis, and she actually said, that her and her son JT were helping the orphans of the Rwanda genocide. Okay? Now, her son is about 10, 11. I guess he was the older brother of Jesse. Well, I went and looked up. Do you know when the Rwanda genocide massacre happened?
It was in the early 90s.
94.
Yeah.
That was 20 years ago.
Right.
So what is she talking about, how she helped the orphans, her and her son helped the orphans of the Rwanda massacre? I mean, who writes this stuff for these people? Do you know what I'm saying?
Was this an interview? Was this a...
Yeah. I can send it to you.
I guess the journalist is compromised in terms of their geography and history, as a lot of Americans are.
And it's like, and then she said in another interview how strong her baby was, how strong Jesse was, and that as a baby in the hospital he crawled out of his crib or his bassinet and crawled up the glass. Okay?
Yeah.
And that he would come in and say, he was like 6 or 9 years old. He would come into the room and go, "Here's Jesse." How would that kid know that? How would a 6-year-old know a Shining reference or a Johnny Carson reference?
You got me.
It's just all the parents' interviews are very convoluted. And if you really listen to them, they just don't hold water,
Right. Well, these things are, how is it that we are going to resolve or come to terms or better understand this event by looking at these various aspects, which I realize, and I have been looking at them for some time, they're all completely inconsistent, to say the least. How are they going to help us in terms of actually, bringing people to justice and taking some real concrete actions in that regard? That's questionable.
Well, when it goes to the highest levels in government, what do you do? Because they clearly have immunity.
There's no arbiter. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Even if they get caught, let's say if like a handful of people came forward and said, here's the evidence and we lied and blah, blah, blah. You know, who you know what I mean? They're not going to go to jail.
the Obama administration is in on it.
That's what I'm trying. I didn't want to say that, but yeah. Basically, the Obama administration is in on it, and the next administration coming in will pardon anybody.
And you have very powerful forces like Michael Bloomberg, who are implicated in it, who at the very least have seized upon the opportunity of this tragic event, again, the way in which it has been reported and portrayed, to push a certain agenda that the Democrats were stating that they were going to go ahead and push back in early November after Obama won a second term. So it should really come as no surprise, and it's just disturbing. Why can't people see it in that larger context?
You know what really disturbs me is, he spent Michael Bloomberg, I think if it wasn't for his second one or third one, I think his third term, he spent $80 million of his own money to become mayor of New York City for his third term, And it's like, well, why would somebody do that? And you have Vince McMahon's wife, when she was running for senator in Connecticut, she spent $80 million of her own money because they're billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
it's like the average poor person doesn't stand a chance.
Yeah. I know it.
I
know. Yeah.
So, I hate to say it. I do not want a violent revolution in this country. A Robespierre kind of French Revolution. But, this might be the only option that's coming.
Well, if you ask me, I would say that it comes right back to the media and media control to a large degree. The fact that we don't have a third or fourth or fifth party in this country. There's a duopoly that's really a monopoly between the Democrats or the Demopublicans and the the Republicans.
Yeah.
And
it's all a show. It's all like wrestling, really. They're all backstage. Okay, you say this, I'm going to say that, I'm going to vote this way, I'm going to vote that way, and you pretend, it's all a show. Then they come out and they play their parts, and they all know how they're going to vote. So the voting is rigged, in my opinion. Nothing gets done. They make all these promises to get elected, and they don't fulfill any of them.
Well, there is kind of a dialectic there in terms of how the pie is going to be carved up and who's going to get what. But you're right. At the end of the day, it's these two parties are answerable to very powerful interests. It's been that case for quite some time. There needs to be a much greater plurality of political views that are represented, and that plurality would include, if it included the majority, it would have to go outside of the bounds of that two-party sort of setup, that kind of paradigm, that left-right paradigm.
So let's get back to Sandy Hook, because we're kind of going into another,
right.
What? In my opinion, I don't think anyone died at Sandy Hook. I think it was all staged. Wolfgang Halbig says, in his opinion, he thinks that it was what's called a capstone drill, a FEMA capstone drill gone live, or not gone live, but where they're just for whatever reason pretending that this really did happen. So, can you tell us your opinion on what you think happened, or can you?
Well, I thought that from quite early on in terms of it likely being a DHS drill. In fact, a number of people contacted me, a few of whom were insiders, and told me exactly that.
Really?
Yeah.
But what is their reason for? Okay, obviously it's about gun control and taking away our guns, but are they concerned at all that people are seeing through this nonsense? It must bother them that's the only reason I could see Anderson Cooper flipping out. Because remember, Gene Rosen was being called up and harassed.
Well, supposedly.
Yeah, supposedly.
Right. I mean, who knows whether or not he was. Maybe he was being harassed by, maybe it was no one actually investigating, researching looking for the truth. Maybe it was someone harassing him just to so that he would make those pronouncements. I mean, that in part is the way I think that these individuals work. But yeah, there were folks that contacted me, and again, that in February of 2013, had quite a few people contact me and give me information, and some of them I was able to get back to, some of them I was not, some of them I just thought maybe were cranks. Of course, Wolfgang got in touch with me as well as early as March of 2013, and I was just too busy really to get back to him. And I should have, he sent along his credentials and what have you, and it wasn't until he had his encounter with law enforcement up there, of course he lives in Central Florida, that I kind of sat up and took notice and attempted to get the word out. And then before you knew it, he was being interviewed by American Free Press and then, some more prominent alternative news outlets. And he was right out there. And he has, given his expertise, has really done a great deal in attempting to get to the bottom of what's taken place. It's unfortunate that, there was that delay in time. Maybe that's attributable to me. I hate to think that might have been the case. But he was among many individuals that came forward and was quite disturbed, because here he is doing this work in terms of consulting, and he has to speak to these people who are school administrators who are all operating on the notion that this event did take place and we have to prevent another one. It's just like 9/11 or a variety of other these various other types of events that have taken place that still so many questions about, and yet those things constitute our reality because they form the basis for our history, even if there's still so many unanswered questions about them. That's very disturbing. It's a very
he told me that all this has turned his life upside down because he was starting a business to work with children with Asperger's syndrome and, what's the other one?
Downs?
Not Downs. The other one.
Autism?
Autism, yeah. He was going to work with children with Asperger's and autism, and I guess, all this heat he's getting, that kind of went away, and his wife is upset with him that, and he said this could cost him his marriage. I mean, so there is a price to pay for delving into this stuff. I mean, no doubt, and a lot of your friends, I mean, I don't know, have you had friends walk away from you and turn their backs on you?
To some degree, yeah, which is upsetting because they don't want to have a conversation about it. They simply want to, give up in any sort of a relationship or what have you. Yeah, I've had that within my profession. I've had that in my personal life. In some cases, I don't have. Some people I've known for years. Some people I've known all my life. I don't get Christmas cards from anymore. Things like that. So yeah, it takes
any family members.
I don't think so. I think maybe a couple of cousins, but that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part, no. I think I've been fortunate in that regard, and that what limited family I do have, they've all been more or less supportive.
It really does show you the mass delusion we're all under, and it's like a mass trance.
It's very unfortunate, and well, I should say it's very tragic unless we can develop a greater skepticism and question the sort of blind faith that we have in our institutions. Then I'm afraid that that's it. We have to recover We have to actually have that, I think, degree of political awareness and engagement and understanding. And that's very lacking. And it's not just, I think that's also the case, and perhaps even more so, even more deeply in professional classes, such as whether it's academe or whether it's law or medicine. There's all this specialization and compartmentalization. And so people do not have the opportunity, or in some cases might be frightened or reluctant to really look at the bigger picture and attempt to kind of figure things out, or they're just too busy. That's also the case. Many of us are working quite a bit, and so we don't have time to really pay as much attention to the news and what's actually going on as we probably should. And so in the defense of those of us, many of us, again, as you were pointing out, you've got a handful of people that have tremendous amount of resources. Majority of us don't have nearly as much. And I was talking about this with someone the other day as well. I think that the way in which we encounter the news and events, public events, important public events such as these shootings that are taking place, it's in a sort of vicarious way where we're not really looking more closely and drilling down as to what actually took place. It's just like, oh, yeah, okay. We take the very brief synopsis that's presented by a broadcast journalist, by a talking head, versus actually looking more closely at what took place. I think that with Sandy Hook, I think that they pushed the stick a little bit too far. And so you do have a number of people, granted it's a small percentage of the overall population, but you do have a number of people who stood up and said, wait a minute. I've got a poll on my website that I've had up there for the past couple of weeks asking people not whether or not they believe that the event took place, the Sandy Hook event took place as has been reported, but rather their friends, their loved ones. What percentage of those friends and loved ones believe that it took place? And about 50 to 60% still say that half or more of their acquaintances, their friends, their loved one believe that it took place as it was reported by major news media at the time. Well, that means, again, according to this poll, which is not rigorously social scientific or anything, but that means that about 30%, because about 10% said they didn't know, but about 30% of those polled said that a minority of their friends or none of their friends believe it anymore. So maybe
we're winning.
Maybe there has been some progress. I hope that there has been to some degree, and that's kind of a loose gauge of where in fact we might be. Over 300 people have taken the poll thus far, so who knows? Maybe there is something to that, but it's certainly it's not as low as 10 or 15%,
right,
5% or 2%, which is what I think it was back in December of 2014. More people have come around and said, "Wait a minute, there's something wrong here." There's a lot of
look how long it took the 9/11 truth movement to roll around,
Yeah, and with no help from certain sorts of actors that you would actually think would be vigorously behind it, such as the liberal left media. In particular, I mean, they walk the walk, but when it comes to really talking the talk, they don't do it. And that's actually nothing new. We shouldn't necessarily be surprised, but you would think that they would actually be more critical. In fact, since Obama's come into office, since 2008, back in the early 2000s, it was the likes of Fox News that were shouting people down for being conspiracy theorists. Now you have the liberal left that are shouting people down for being conspiracy theorists about things like Boston or Sandy Hook. You still have Fox and the traditional kinds of, standard right-wing conservatives, boilerplate right-wing conservatives. But now you have the left that are, again, some of the most vociferous people in terms of seeking to downplay or shout down anyone for being if you're not a conspiracy theorist in that regard, you might be a climate denier, and it's just amazing the types of attacks that
they're really authoritarian. I mean, they want to throw you in jail for disagreeing with them if you don't believe there are people calling for, if you don't believe in global warming, they think you should be thrown in jail.
I know. It's really amazing. And And it's just there's just this mindset that, well, it's scientific. The scientists say so. Well, wait a minute. Who's scientists? What are you talking about? I mean, yeah, don't get me started. But that's it's more or less a mantra. It's something that is just accepted, even in academia, where you have people who have all sorts of credentials, and in some cases are mystified by those. And they can't be told any different. So there's no point in actually trying to argue with them. They're among the most closed-minded, and they're supposed to be the most open-minded.
Have you hooked up with any other Sandyhook truthers like Wolfgang, or I'm trying to think who else is in? There aren't too many Sandyhook people.
Well, I've spoken with Wolfgang on the phone here and there, and
okay.
It's interesting. I think that since I sort of began to tread down the path, and it was not necessarily of my own choosing, but being highlighted by the news media as we began our conversation talking about that, I found that there are a lot of people, a lot of relationships that I forged with people I would never have known, who've in some cases sought me out, and those have developed into, pretty fruitful relationships. And I'm able to talk about, and we're able to exchange ideas and things like that. And again, I don't think that those sorts of ties would have emerged or been able to sort of take root without this event having taken place in my life. And, that's a good thing. There are also relationships and individuals that I really no longer have ties with, as I mentioned earlier, because they will not entertain the idea that our government or forces within it could be so corrupt. And so we've parted ways, and maybe that's for the better. If they don't have a mind that is open enough and aren't intelligent enough to actually ask questions,
right? Yeah.
Then kind of wasting my time as well. So overall, it's been good, and I've I think grown, intellectually as a result of this. I guess kind of a trial by fire to some degree, and
so this must have been a huge awakening for you. I mean, was there any other conspiracy theories that you were into, before Sandy Hook, or was Sandy Hook your big moment of awakening, or was there conspiracies or things you thought were shady before?
Oh, I think that I've always been somewhat suspicious. Back when I was an undergraduate in college, I was looking at the JFK assassination, and this was actually before Oliver Stone's film came out. And when I saw that, I was just floored. But at the same time, I was subject and susceptible to the propaganda that it was really at least partially fiction. It was partially made up by Stone himself. That was the mainstream media's big campaign against that film. And in fact, it's a pretty accurate rendering if you read Garrison's work. And he was really a stand-up character, I think, in that overall episode, in the 1960s. And I've delved into that quite a bit more so since then. But at that time, again, this was back in the 1980s, I don't think that I had a mentor or a guide to point me in the right direction, to really kind of satiate that curiosity and continue that yearning for knowledge in terms of, hey, look at this book. Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? Because none of my professors were asking these questions. People that I was close to were not asking questions about, say, for example, a major political assassination of the 1960s. And I didn't really begin asking these things more so until the theft of the election in 2000 and then 9/11. And I was still untenured until 2007. And so I realized I had to kind of hang low, to lay low until I was able to secure promotion. And then I've come out quite a bit more so in 2010, 2011. And now I'm focusing specific kind of research on looking at this topic. And in fact, there's a conference on a conspiracy theory that's being conducted by the political science department at University of Miami in March, and I've been invited to that. I was very pleased to get that invitation. I wasn't sure whether or not they were inviting me as a specimen or as a colleague, But so there's like this scholarship that's developing around it. Some of it is still kind of the old guard, where it still takes it at arm's distance. The things that are being looked at by independent researchers and have been looked at for many years. And there's other work that I think is more honest, that's more diligent, that is deeper, and that looks more so at this phenomenon in our culture and the small portion of the population, nevertheless, that really do question these official narratives. So I think that's really exciting, and I'm happy to be a part of it. Wow.
Yeah, the JFK thing. That's a whole subject, and maybe that's a show we could do at a later date.
It really is. It's but that's, I think, perhaps really the most important one. Outside of, you could point to the Federal Reserve and other things as well, but really in recent times, I think that is especially significant, and it's something that also really profoundly affected my family too. Who were, who identify themselves as being Irish Catholic. And so there was this kind of, real profound identification with the Kennedy family, and that my father's side of the family had especially. And my uncle, helped campaign for John and Robert when they would come through New York State. And, so it was a big deal then. I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't understand the law.
Did you ever see the connection or the odd coincidence between Kennedy and Lincoln?
In terms of, there are a number of similarities. For example, being succeeded by Johnson.
Yeah, succeeded by Johnson, being 100 years apart, like 1860 to 1960. Mm-hmm. Lincoln had a secretary, Miss Lincoln. I'm sorry, Kennedy had a secretary. Yeah, we're at the end. James, we're at the end of our hour, so what we can get into it. We could do another JFK show if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fine.
Let's just wrap this up. This was Parlay. James, you want to give your website and your information? Not where you go to work, but just give us your website and your information and where you can be reached. And
yeah, it's memoryholeblog.com. You can find out information about me there. Contact me if you wish, and read what I've written most recently, and link over to the interview program that I do on Truth Frequency Radio.
And when's your podcast on Truth Frequency Radio?
It's Sundays at 7 p.m., but you can listen after that. You can download the podcast off of my site.